Hey, hello, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my February reads. So, similar to the January video, I'm going to be organizing it by author, not necessarily in the order in which I read it. But yeah, if you are ready, buckle in. Okay, so the first book that I'm going to talk about is, do you remember how in my January video I had mentioned that I was like in the mood to read sad stuff that made me cry? So the first book I'm going to talk about is that second book that I read. It was in fact the first book that I read in February, or at least finished in February, and it made me bawl my eyes out. I was distraught reading it, but like in a good way. This book is When Breath Becomes Air. This is a book that was written, it's a memoir. It's written by Dr. Paul Kalanithi, and then there is an afterword by his wife Linda, and the whole thing is edited and like compiled essentially by Abraham Fergesi. So, spoiler alert, Dr. Kalanithi had written his book primarily in the final year of his life. He was a neurosurgeon, like one of those really high speed, was doing very well, was like on the upward trajectory, sort of doctors. And unfortunately, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, which ultimately spread, and he did not survive. He had decided, he'd been toying with the idea of writing a memoir for a while. He'd been toying with the idea of writing full stop for a long time. And in the last year of his life, he decided that like it was time to go ahead and start doing that. The book is it's focused on like a couple of very specific periods of time in his life, primarily the point, like the beginning of his career, and then the point at which he had been diagnosed, and how he and his wife like navigated that, and how despite being able to gain access to some of the best minds in the field, he was ultimately untreatable near the end and passed away. And it's devastating. It was devastating to read. But the writing itself is beautiful. He had even mentioned that like he had toyed with the idea of being a writer earlier in his career trajectorying, and then decided to change tack surprisingly late. And I think that if he had decided to pursue that, he would have been well received, for lack of a better term. But that aside, there are a lot of like good philosophical questions asked throughout the book that he posed to himself and worked through, and it was incredibly inspiring and absolutely heartbreaking. I really, really enjoyed it. So I recommend it on its own, but if you need a cathartic read, like cathartic cry, this is absolutely a book to reach for. So I gave it naturally a 5 out of 5. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about is Dominion. This is by Addie E. Citchens. It is a Southern Gothic novel, litfic sort of thing, and I guess not litfic. That implies that it's lighter than it is. It's a Southern Gothic. You are in Dominion, Mississippi, thus the name, following the wife of a sort of prolific pastor at a Baptist church in town. Him and his wife are basically like the leaders of their society, just naturally by him being the pastor, but he's also just one of those like very charismatic, everybody loves him, and also he gets away with absolutely everything. You're following mostly her, but you're also following Diamond, who is the like love interest of their youngest son, Emmanuel, also known as Wonder Boy, one of those kids that just can do no wrong, absolutely amazing grades, absolutely amazing at sports, like beautiful voice, whatever. But not everything is as it seems. The family is not as happy as it appears. The husband is, he's kind of violent, and he's very misogynistic, and he's extremely hypocritical, very narcissistic. There's infidelity, and you are following like Priscilla just sort of deal with that, to include like self-medication. And that naturally influences their children, especially their youngest boy, who can do no wrong. And he finds himself in a sort of predicament that completely shakes the community. It is really, really beautifully written, really amazing. I felt like I was being let in on a secret. I felt like I was maybe reading somebody's diary, rather than just reading characters on a page. Like, these characters felt extremely real. And I don't know, but my like suspicion for why they were so impactful for me was because how colloquial all of the writing is, all of the dialogue, as well as the narration. And that's part of what lends it to that feeling that I'm being let in on a secret or being let in to like read somebody's diary, because even the narration is very colloquial. And I adored it. I absolutely ate it up. I think I read it over the course of 2 days, but it was in 2 sessions. And I ate it up. That was another 5 out of 5. And this is one of those ones that I think, I mean, I know that I'm still pretty early into 2026, but I think it's going to end up in like my top 10, if not even my top 3. It was just so good. Like, there's a reason why it won why it won some prizes. So yeah, absolutely recommend. 5 out of 5.
I got a secret. More than one. Don't seem likely I'd tell them to you. Now do it.
The next book I'm going to talk about is The Three-Body Problem. This is by Cixin Liu, Cixinliu.
Liu Cixin.
It is translated by Ken Liu. And if you are familiar with like the Netflix series, it's not quite the same. It's very similar. I think there's only 1 season, and I watched it a couple years ago, or I guess a year ago, whenever I watched it. I don't remember. When it came out, I watched it. You are not really following the players in this game, or in this book. You are following primarily this one scientist, Yang, I think, who sort of stumbled into this conspiracy, this sort of weird society after he had identified that something was going very weird with his hobby. He is also the leading scientist in the development of like nanomaterials, and turns out that is connected, in fact. And the conspiracy just goes deeper. You're also following just around the Cultural Revolution in China. You're following the daughter of a scientist who was very brutally killed immediately in front of her, and just because of the like implications of what her family may have stood for. It was one of those like, we punish them all sort of situations. And she had to work really hard to get herself into a position where she wasn't going to be killed. And then she ends up being sent, sort of exiled off to this like radar facility, and gets more and more deep into, you know, what they do despite limitations that were put on her. And then if you have seen the show, and it's really not a spoiler if you read the description, they make contact with an alien race. And that ties directly to the game that does in fact exist in the book. It's just not quite as prevalent to the Three-Body Problem game, which is more of a method of running exercises to identify information than like a game. I liked it. I liked the story. I didn't super love the presentation. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that it was just extremely academic, but like this is a failing on me. This is like a me problem. I am just not very science minded. I'm not very math minded. Those were not my subjects that I super excelled at. You can probably guess I'm, one of those liberal arts nerds. I'm a history nerd. I'm not a science nerd. And I really never have been. I was really good at algebra. That's kind of it. So a lot of the book felt like I was doing homework. I had to Google things. The explanations for some stuff just wasn't, despite there being several iterations of the same explanation, there was not enough variance that I was able to like pick up on what was different to make me understand it better. I just let a mosquito in. I'm so annoyed. And reading it was just sort of a chore. And this is one of my friend's like absolute favorite series. And so I was like, I'm going to push through. And the concept itself is very interesting, but it really did feel like a slog. I did not end up loving it, which is sad because I super love science fiction. And I decided that I am going to go ahead and keep reading the series. The ending I thought was interesting enough that I am inclined to continue. That's a common theme with me with my reading habits. But yeah, I gave it a 3.75 just because of how much it felt like I was doing homework. Okay, so the next couple of books I'm going to talk about are by Josiah Bancroft. So it's a continuation of my reading of the series of the books of Babel. The first book that I'm going to talk about is Arm of the Sphynx. This is the second book in the 4-part series. It was fine. It felt a little bit weaker than the first one, and I'm not sure if it's just because the novelty was starting to wear off. I don't have a better answer for you for why I got that vibe. It was fun though. This is where you really start to get into the pirate steampunk part of the story. This is also where the cast of characters sort of expands and gets really more established for who is going to continue on throughout the entire series, which I personally really enjoyed. I super love the whole cast. I love Irene and Velita and Edith and obviously Tom and Adam. There are a couple more that come up, and the primary adversary in this particular book is the elusive and mysterious Sphynx, who is sort of like the mastermind of the tower, not the builder of the tower, but the mastermind of the machinations of the tower. They're the ones who built all of the wonders essentially all the mechanical wonders in the tower. And they're also the ones who both create and employ the Watchmen. And you also meet Byron in this one. There's a really fun, dynamic between specifically Velita and the Sphynx that I really enjoyed. It was very endearing and also kind of frustrating just because Velita's just who she is. She's sort of brash and crazy and wild, and I love that about her, but also my God, girl, you're putting yourself in some very silly situations. But that said, I did end up giving it a 4.5. Wasn't as, whoopah as the first book was for me, and that's fine. I'm just moving around a lot in this video. There's a lot of visual interest in my background changing. Okay, so I'm so sorry. The next book I'm going to talk about from this same series is going to be The Hod King. This is the third book of the 4 books, and surprisingly, or unsurprisingly rather, it is one of the higher rated ones for me. Like I've said in previous videos, I sort of tend to think that the third book typically ends up being my favorite, and that is that is true for this one as well, for this series as well. It just holds strong for me. There's a cast split in this one. Split the party. Don't split the party. And so you're starting to follow several different timelines or several different storylines over the same time. And one thing I kind of don't super love about this series is the way that it's handled. So it'll be group 1 is here in the timeline, group 2 is here in the timeline, group 2 will move forward, and then you'll bounce back to group 1, who will then move forward and meet them. And then it sort of continues on, and it gets a little bit confusing the first time it happens. It's very jarring, and Josiah Bancroft does not seem to adhere to the mindset that if you're going to be changing perspectives, you should be changing chapters. He will do that in a single chapter, and that is totally fine. It's just not a method that I'm personally super, super familiar with. Not familiar with, but I just don't experience it a whole lot with the books that I tend to read. But once I got my bearings under me, it was fine, and I ended up really loving it. This one has my favorite little side quest, side timeline thing with Irene and Velita. And also, surprisingly, there's a point in this book that made me gasp and cry. So emotional complexity. I ended up really liking this one. I gave it a 4.75. I'm not going to move again this time. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about is Blood Over Brighthaven. This is by M.L. Wang. This is a dystopian fantasy. The basic concept of it is Siona is a orphan who, ever since she was a little girl, decided that no matter what she does, she is going to be the best at it. And she decided that she's going to be the best mage to have ever existed. And she works her way up. She goes to these increasingly prestigious schools. She gets herself admitted into exceedingly prestigious positions. She is able to network successfully because she is, in fact, the best at what she does. And she gets it so that she is able to be the only woman to apply essentially to be a part of the magistrate. And so the important part about this thing is that it only happens every 10 years where they allow one woman to apply. And like the way that they do it, the reason why they do it like that is so that that one woman can be made to fail. And then they can point and say, this is why we don't accept women. And then they just don't touch it for another 9 years. And then they touch it again and keep doing that ad nauseum. Okay, so Siona's like, I'm not going to let that happen with me. And so she doesn't. She, in fact, gets in, and then she finds herself swept up into uncovering and like 100 years long conspiracy. She unveils it essentially through her work with an unlikely partner. She is partnered up with a Quen janitor as her assistant. It was originally supposed to be like a joke, like a you don't even deserve to have like a properly trained assistant. You're not welcome here sort of move. And it blew up in their faces because he ends up being integral to her finding out what she finds out. And he's very smart and a very good, I guess, like foil to her. His personality is very complementary to hers in that it is basically the opposite of hers. And this is sort of important that it was not just a janitor, but it's a Quen janitor, because in this particular society, the Quen are the lowest tier of their city. It's like an enclosed wall city. They come from the blighted lands immediately outside of the city, which are blighted because so the story goes, so the doctrine goes, because they rejected the appropriate god. And it describes in the book very early on how the blight manifests itself. It is literally like these strikes of lightning essentially that come down, and if they touch a person and any person who is connected to a person who is touched, so if they're holding hands or if they're holding a child, if they're holding the child, then the child will also be blighted, and they're literally unraveled, and it's extremely gory and painful and very traumatic. That's first chapter experience that you read. It's oh fuck, the blight is gnarly. Yeah. What I haven't done this for the other books, but one thing that I really liked about this one was the magic system. Surprising. I thought it was just very interesting. It's essentially magical coding. They have this typewriter with specialized keys that are sort of shaped like runes that make these codes, and they have to code out what they want it to do, what they want the spell to be doing, and then they put it into this machine, and then they tie it to coordinates essentially to where they can siphon that energy from. And I just thought that was fun, interesting. I'm always here for a novel magic style or magic system, and I felt like this one was particularly novel. I was just oh my God, it's magical coding. It's amazing. I really, really liked it. And so naturally I gave that one a 5 out of 5.
My house waits life.
Now I'm moving closer. I'm in such a weird mood. I had to go into work. It's a Saturday, and I had to go into work today, and I didn't want to, obviously, naturally. And then, but it's so beautiful outside, so it forced me to go outside. And then I went to a craft fair. I'm just rambling. I'm in a weird mood. It's a good one though. Okay. The next 4 books I'm going to talk about are by Matt Dinniman. These are a continuation of the Dungeon Crawler Carl
We did it!
series, which, as you can tell, I am eating them up. Like I said in the January review, I'm very much the target demographic for this. I'm vibing with this series. I ate them up. February's a short month, and I went through 4 of them. And these are not ones that I'm listening to. Although I've heard the audiobook is really good. Heard the voice actors are super good. But this one I'm just physically reading. So that's just dedicating a lot of my time to reading this series. I'm loving it. So the first book I'll talk about is Carl's Doomsday Scenario. That is the second book in the series. And you are on the 4, 5, 6. You're on the third floor. So you went through 1 and 2 in the first book, 3 on the second book, right? No, I have to Google it. One moment. What floors apply to each dungeon crawler Carl books? Okay, book 1 is floor 1 and 2. Book 2 is floor 3. So you're on the third floor. This one is more of a, like what you'd expect to experience playing like Dragon Age or Skyrim. Like you were going into the settlements instead and interacting with like merchants and whatever. There's still the safe rooms and blah, blah, blah. Donut takes a thing that like takes an ability thing that makes it so that Mordecai is a manager rather than their like party guide guy, and that unlocks some stuff. This is the book where you're really starting to get into like the larger scale. You're like, each one I feel like unpeels a layer. I guess you're going this way if you're unpeeling a layer. Unpeels a layer of the onion to figure out like how far some of this nonsense universally goes, like galaxy wide goes. So you're starting to like meet non-player characters more in this one, and ended up being a lot of fun. I gave this one a 4.5. The third book is the Dungeon Anarchist's Cookbook, so this is floor 4, and sort of surprisingly this one breaks my typical like I said, usually the third book is my favorite book in a series, and this one wasn't my favorite. It was fine. It was good. It was the Iron Tangle, which is incredibly confusing and difficult to follow. But you are once again peeling more layers of the onion. You're starting to get into like faction stuff. Not faction wars. That's actually later, but like it's later even than where I've read up to. But there's a lot of like political intrigue starting to work its way into the series. This is also where you start to get to know Katya, who has become a fast favorite, as implied very quickly. I like her a lot. She's a lot of fun. There's also a really clever plot device that allowed the characters to just sort of like muddle through and figure out shit on their own without being given the answers, essentially. They had no access to some information sources, and I thought that was very clever because it allowed for more like rapid but also deep character building and better character relationship building. So I thought that was just a clever plot device usage. However, the overall impact of the book just wasn't as much fun. It started to feel a little bit repetitive. And so as a result, I gave this one a 4.25. So that's still a really good rating, but like it just wasn't as good as the other ones that I had read so far. The next book is The Gates of the Feral Gods. This is the 4th book and the 5th floor. This is where you meet Samantha with a P at the beginning and an E at the end. And you are starting to get more into the concept of like how gods work in this universe. Not even just in this game, but in this universe, full stop. There's like implications in this one that I think were both fun and also a little bit scary and also a little bit confusing. The interviews and stuff that are happening are starting to also increase and get just insane. Carl and Donut are just like not taking shit anymore. They are the like concept of this floor, as you've probably gleaned by this point, each of the floors within the books, within the show, each of the floors are like sort of, they're themed, similar to like old school side scrolling games. There's an underwater level or whatever. Each level has a theme. This theme is bubbles, bubble universes. So they, in order to continue on to the next level, they have to pop their bubble. And the only way to pop the bubble is to complete 3 very specific overarching, like universe-wide, everybody who's in it has quests. And Interestingly, all of the remaining crawlers are not necessarily on the same world. In fact, there's only like a couple hundred or so on each of these worlds. It's like a sheet of bubble wrap, basically, and each of the bubbles is a different dome universe, different dome world, and they have to pop it. And once they pop it, they can help other worlds pop theirs, but they can't otherwise interact in any way, and they cannot descend if their world does not get popped. This one was very chaotic and introduced us more to Lewis and Fierce and Juicebox and Bonnie and a few other characters. Other pre-established side characters got to have a little bit more flavor, essentially, in this one, as well as the last one. Like Elle became just a whole badass between the second and the third one, and then the third and the fourth. You're still following along with Katya. Obviously, you're still with Donut and Carl. This one I liked pretty well. I ended up giving it a 4.5. And then the last of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series that I read during this period is The Butcher's Masquerade. This is the 5th book. This one had my favorite boss battle of the series so far. Like, it was so good. It was everything I wanted in a boss battle, like at the end of the level or whatever. And there are now some additional complications in the party makeups, as well as in the like other side characters that were not necessarily a part of the Carl Donut party, which has been throughout the whole series very small. They have introduced the concept of guilds either in this one or I think it was this one, and so they're starting to like interact with more and more of the crawlers, and that has allowed for some more fun interactions. This is also the one where Proponente gets some of his first like proper character development, one of the side characters. This is also where the hunters come in, which are non-crawler players who pay to play to set themselves up for a later level that the crawlers will be sent to. And their whole like goal is to hunt down the crawlers and buy or steal or loot after killing magical items and stuff, so they can be set up for a later thing. And true to form, Carl makes everything, all the things that the dungeon developers had planned. He makes sure that they're all properly and truly effed up. So yeah, this one was a lot of fun. I gave it a 4.5 as well. I think that's probably going to end up being my consistent rating for this one, unless something is particularly awesome or particularly shitty. It feels like 4.5 is so far my overall rating. I am actively reading the 6th book right now. So that will probably be in my March reviews, unless something happens and I don't finish it this month. But who knows?
Because maybe.
I moved again. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Rebecca Yarros' 4th Wing. You can judge me all you want. I'm having fun, obviously. I liked the story. I did not like the writing. It is very modern in its telling, despite being set in a very not modern setting. There are dragons and signets, which are developed via connection with a dragon. The dragon has to choose you. Anyway, you are following Cadet Violet Sorengale, who had spent basically her entire life planning to be a scribe. And then at the very last minute, her mother said, "Teehee, no, you're not. You're going to go be a writer." She is the commandant of the war college, Basgiath. So she couldn't really say no. And also it's her mom. So she does the parapet thing. She ends up joining the Rider Quadrant. The war college is like split into a Rider Infantry, Scholar, Scribes, and Healers. And the Rider Quadrant, Rider, like you're riding a dragon. The Rider Quadrant is known to be exceptionally violent and exceptionally dangerous. On average, they lose like something between 20 and 50% of like each class in their first year. So that sets you up. Violet has very much not been training for this her entire life, like most of the other volunteers. But naturally she uses her wits to survive. And then she eventually like actually trains and stuff. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I just didn't like the writing. This book was written in like 2023 or something, or at least published in like 2023, I think. It was in the 2020s anyway. And the use of the phrase "for the win," used unironically not on Tumblr circa 2011. Interesting choice. I was like, what am I reading? I genuinely had to tell myself to just keep pushing through because like I've got a lot of friends that really like this book, and like my stepmom likes this book, and like, you know, I trust their reading recommendations, and for the most part when a friend or like a family member recommends something to me, I know that I'm gonna like it because they know what I like to read. So I pushed through, and then once I finally acclimatized myself to the writing style, I ended up really liking it. But I wasn't that forgiving when I originally rated this. So I originally gave it a 3.25. I think that I would probably, and I probably will right now, like in a minute when I go on my phone, I'm probably going to retcon that to like a 3.75 or a 3.5. We're going to go for 3.5. There's enough like egregious writing, like genuinely like not good writing, even aside from the modernity, that I think later on, in my opinion, gets better as you go. I'm so conflicted. I really liked the story. I liked the story a lot. I just, Okay. Decided 3.75. I'm giving it a 3.75 because I would recommend it because I like the second book and I do like the story overall. Spice level isn't too like heated. It's not too uncomfortable and you can skip through it without losing anything. And the story itself is just a lot of fun. I mean, it's, you know, it's a war college. The characters aren't 16, so that's nice. They're in 20s. And I like Violet a lot. I actually really like Xaden a lot. I liked, despite it all, ultimately, I like Dane, I like Rhiannon, I like them all. I like the characters a lot. It's just so fun. It's just so fun, you know? Yeah, 3.75. We're gonna give it a 3.75. Okay, the next book that I'm gonna talk about is a T. Kingfisher book. It is What Moves the Dead. This is a like horror fantasy book. It's basically just a reskinning of the Fall of the House of Usher. And she acknowledges that in the afterword. But it's fun. It's fun. It's like fungal zombies. I guessed what was wrong very quickly, and I was satisfied by it nonetheless. I don't know. It was a fun read. I read it. It was very short. I think it took me, 2 hours to read. I think it might be a novella. No, I think it's categorized as a novel. But it was a quick read. It was a lot of fun. I like T. Kingfisher's like style of writing. I like the main character a lot. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot to say about it because it really is just the retelling of Fall of the House of Usher. So yeah, whatever. I gave that one a 4. Okay, and then the last book I'm going to talk about today is Atmosphere. This is by Taylor Jenkins. I actually just talked about this book last night with one of my friends because she read it for a book club. I read it because my friend gave it to me for Christmas because I told her that I wanted to start reading things that are outside of what I always read, which is primarily, obviously, as you guys can tell, fantasy. And so she gifted it to me, and then I read it last month. Joan is she's a scientist, and she is also a teacher, and she applies to become an astronaut in 1980s America at NASA, and she ends up being picked up, and you're basically just following her go through her training, and like it's mostly focusing on the dynamics between her and her coworkers, very especially the people that are on her team. And it's a really kind of like lovingly told story of sexuality and female friendships and platonic friendships and family strife. all under this umbrella of, and also there's space travel. But only like kind of a little bit. It's mostly the on the ground training that you're following. And I liked it a lot. I felt like the ending was a little bit neat, but at the same time, I think I would have been mad if it had ended differently. I think I would have been happier if there had been like an epilogue or something that would just allowed the promise for everything to live on a little bit more, rather than just being like doo, doo, doo. I think the highlight of the book for me, or one of the highlights for the book for me, was the relationship between Joan and Franny. It's heartbreaking what Franny is put through, and Joan really steps up, which I love. I have a couple of qualms with how it ended, but I loved the female relationships that were in this one. I felt like they were really strong and fleshed out, and I just really enjoyed it a lot. And there was, representation of the different types of, especially in in male dominant work fields. Male dominated fields is the term I wanted. There tends to be at least one person of a few sort of flavors of people, of women, that I've experienced myself, where you got the one who is always laughing at the guy's jokes and never calls him out for like sexist shit and just wants to be like one of the guys. I'm not like other girls, the N-logs, which usually is just hiding, for the most part, some type of insecurity, clearly, if you have to call attention to that. And then there's the actual genuinely just sort of going with the flow, whatever. And then you got the people who like stand up for stand against the overwhelming misogyny that can sometimes happen in male dominated fields, regardless of how it's going to impact them. And then there are the people who just fit into the mold of what they're expected to be. Obviously, it's a sliding scale. People follow into, like, each of these individual ones are themselves a sliding scale. Like, we are not characters in a book, but these are characters in a book. So you do have representation of basically all of these like caricatures kind of, but they don't feel like caricatures. They do feel like characters. Like, there's more to them. I liked it. I thought it was a fun read. It was a quick read as well. It only took me a couple of days, and I gave it a solid 4.0.
Fly me to the moon and
Okay, so that is all the books that I read in February. What month am I talking about? That's all the books that I read in February. I really enjoyed them. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you would like me to do a more in-depth review on any of the books that I've read, or if you have a recommendation for a book for me to read. I am about to get started on a advanced reader copy of another book. That video might end up getting posted before this one, and if that's the case, then I will put it here, and if that's not the case, I will put a meme here instead. But yeah, so thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye. My pinky hurts. I'm gonna shift my position here, sorry. It hurts my fingies. My hand is shaking. I'm gonna shift so you don't have to fight the editing. Pardon me while I find a place to put my camera. I've moved again. I'm so sorry.